After 3.5 years, or 1,286 days, Alex Saab is finally released from his illegal captivity. Alex Saab is a Venezuelan diplomat who was kidnapped by the United States in 2020 when he was traveling to Iran to buy food and medicine for his people under their public CLAP program. The United States government considered this a violation of the U.S. sanctions on Venezuela and accused Saab of money laundering. Alex Saab was kidnapped on June 12, 2020 in Cabo Verde, an island off the coast of Africa, while en route to Iran. There he was held in detention for 16 months, where Saab, a cancer survivor, was denied medical treatment and held in solitary confinement in dark cells before he was extradited to the United States to a Miami prison on October 16, 2021, right before Cabo Verde's newly elected government took over, where they were promised to release Saab. Alex Saab is a diplomat, an ambassador. The kidnapping of a foreign diplomat is a violation of the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations that provides inviolability or protection of a diplomatic person. By kidnapping and illegally imprisoning Mr. Saab, the United States and the Cabo Verde governments have set a new international precedent, whereas before the loss of the Vienna Convention was applied and practiced and diplomatic immunity existed, but now once broken, that law can be considered fair game to break again. This lawless action can occur again by another nation or even repeated by the same nations. The illegal captivity and extradition of diplomat Alex Saab now sets a dangerous global precedent, a new standard. A similar case that affects the world and sets a new world precedent is the case of Australian journalist and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. WikiLeaks, along with several notable media outlets such as The Guardian and The New York Times, worked together on the Iraq war logs and the Afghanistan war logs received by whistleblowers. Together, they published breaking news of U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, such as the famous collateral murder video that helped to evidently bring an end to the Iraq war.
That's what he's accused of if you look at the indictment, receiving and disclosing national security information that's classified. He's the first journalist in U.S. history who's being indicted under the Espionage Act for simply publishing true information of public interest. So I ask myself, why are states spreading this type of narrative about him? And then, well, if you look at what he's done, then it starts adding up because, well, he published evidence for serious crimes by government officials. Now, normally, these government officials should be prosecuted. And we have clear evidence. I mean, it's not even disputed that this torture happened, that, civilians were murdered, that journalists were murdered in collateral murder video and so on. Nobody has ever been prosecuted for it. And so that's really what this is about. That states are afraid of what WikiLeaks initiated. They created a mechanism by which whistleblowers can anonymously submit hundreds of thousands of pages of secret material through the internet. So that's different than, let's say, the Pentagon Papers in the 70s. Well, yes, that was a big leak, but that was pretty much the limit of what you could do at the time without the internet and so on. Today, with the internet, if WikiLeaks, the idea of WikiLeaks proliferates, and there's going to be 5,000 WikiLeaks, 10 years from now, that's the end of the business model of governments conducting governance through secrecy. That's the end of impunity for war crimes and, grave human rights violations and corruption. And I believe that's what this really is about.
One of the best ways to achieve justice is to expose injustice. Said by Julian Assange.
Shortly after, Julian Assange of an independent free press became a victim of a circus of accusations that brought him to a point of seeking asylum in 2012 at the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK. The president of Ecuador, who granted Assange political asylum, was then met with political persecution and betrayed by his party member, who came to serve foreign interests. It's very difficult to have, especially in South America, a military invasion from the United States. That is not possible. But there are more fine, if you want, ways in order to destabilize a government that they don't like. For instance, financing the opposition groups, for instance, NGOs, and they receive this money, the financing, from the National Endowment for Democracy, that everybody knows is a financial branch of the CIA, said Rafael Correa, former president of Ecuador. Sometime later, after the political overturn in Ecuador, Correa's successor, Lenin Moreno, withdrew Assange's asylum. Julian Assange was no longer under the protection of the embassy, and the UK authorities forcibly removed him and took him to their maximum security facility, Belmarsh Prison. Julian Assange has been suffering in this prison since, including experiencing a stroke.
Mr. Assange shows all the symptoms of a person who has been exposed to psychological torture for a prolonged period of time. I'm appalled at the sustained and concerted abuse that this man has been exposed to at the hands of several democratic states over a period of almost a decade. This man's procedural rights have been violated for 10 years by all involved states in every jurisdiction and in every step of the procedures. It is shocking to see how that's possible. We are talking about someone who has exposed information and evidence for serious government misconduct. The elephant in the room is the information he has exposed, and that no one wants to investigate because it leads very high up.
A mockery is made of the judicial system and the UK-US extradition treaty that disallows extradition of a political prisoner. Julian Assange is yet to be committed and was not even charged with the crime at the time of arrest. As in the case of Alex Saab, Julian Assange's case will also set a new precedent, one where investigative journalism would become a crime around the world and where any country could then apply its rules to another country's citizen.
The case of Julian Assange, in my opinion, and with my experience of 20 years in the international system, this case is probably one of the biggest judicial scandals in history. It is the story of a man who is being persecuted in our parts of the world for having told the truth. He has challenged the powerful who do their business in the shadow. He has exposed war crimes, he has exposed torture, he has exposed corruption. It's an inconvenient truth. Are you teaching your children that it's a bad thing or a good thing to say the truth? I have 2 children in primary school age. I cannot leave a world to them where it has become a crime to tell the truth, because once that has happened, we are living in a tyranny.
Julian Assange is an Australian citizen being persecuted by a foreign government for reporting on war crimes. And just as the Alex Saab case, the world is fighting to free Assange and prevent his extradition to the United States, where it has been said he will not get a fair trial and is awaiting a prison sentence of 175 years. When another nation can apply its laws onto your citizen, are you a sovereign nation?
This meeting tonight is about Australia's silence on the denigration of basic liberties such as freedom of speech and the presumption of innocence. It's about the right of Australians to know what their government is doing in their name in secret. It's about the duty of those charged with alerting the public to the truth: journalists, broadcasters, writers, academics, to end their compliance with rapacious power. And it's about the plight of an Australian citizen, and a very courageous one, Julian Assange.
The expert panel called on the Swedish and British authorities to end Mr. Assange's deprivation of liberty. I think the recommendation is quite clear, and it is legally binding to the extent that it is based on international human rights norms which have been ratified by states. And when a state ratifies a convention, in this case the Convention on civilian political rights, that state has the obligation to implement its provisions. So indirectly, yes, it is binding. The expert also found that the detention was arbitrary because Mr. Assange was held in isolation in Wandsworth prison, and because a lack of diligence by the Swedish prosecutor office in its investigations resulted in his lengthy loss of liberty. 5 years, the investigation is still preliminary, no charges have been filed against him, but still he is deprived of his liberty. If this is not arbitrary, what is arbitrary detention?
In the case of Alex Saab, kidnappings and brutal abuses were appealed by the Venezuelan government and by many legal, human rights, and grassroots organizations internationally.
Cabo Verde no acató.
Cuando ganaron legalmente, judicialmente, una decisión del tribunal que rige, de acuerdo a un convenio internacional, a todos los países miembros de la Comunidad de Estados de África Occidental, que sus siglas en inglés es ECOWAS, precisamente.
Cabo Verde apela y ECOWAS se ratifica en junio del 2021. Les exige nuevamente mi liberación inmediata por haber sido un arresto ilegal y arbitrario. Yo en ese año también demandé al ministro de Justicia de Cabo Verde, demandé al único nombre que sabía de la tortura. Colocamos como 2 o 3 demandas allá. Me decían que estaba loco, cómo demandaba yo a la gente ahí. Las Naciones Unidas, el grupo de trabajo de las Naciones Unidas, los relatores de tortura de las Naciones Unidas, pasaron varias resoluciones a Cabo Verde exigiéndoles mi libertad. Cabo Verde no cumplió. La comisión que se llama African Commission, que es vinculante para las Cortes de Cabo Verde, también falló a mi favor, ordenando a Cabo Verde suspender la detención arbitraria e ilegal. Cabo Verde tampoco la acató. Y un día antes de las elecciones presidenciales de Cabo Verde, donde ese presidente había comentado que tenía que acatar las órdenes de ECOWAS,
el candidato para entonces que iba a ganar, correcto.
Que efectivamente ganó, un día antes me sacaron.
El sábado de la noche.
Fue el segundo secuestro.
Cabecé de frente el movimiento Free Alex Saab, quise defenderlo de frente a mi esposo y ahí sí, el movimiento creció de una manera impresionante. Nosotros logramos la conformación del movimiento en más de 40 países del mundo. Y lo impresionante es que los venezolanos, cuando se unieron a la causa de Alex, ni siquiera lo conocían. Ni Alex se conocía a ellos. Y ellos, sin dudarlo, entendieron lo que Alex estaba viviendo, lo que nosotros estamos viviendo como familia, y enseguida se solidarizaron con nosotros. Fue realmente muy hermoso. Y nunca me hicieron sentir sola, ni ustedes siempre me acompañaron en estos 3 años y medio e hicieron este milagro posible. Y un papel fundamental lo jugó también el movimiento Free Alex Saab, porque ellos reclamaron en cada esquina, en cada rincón, la libertad de Alex. Y nosotros logramos grandes cosas también. Nosotros logramos pronunciamientos importantes de las Naciones Unidas, del grupo de trabajo. Fue de la relatora de la medida coercitiva unilateral, esto fue el 14 de octubre del 2023. Logramos pronunciamiento por más de 202 ONG, ganadores del Premio Nobel de la Paz, de organizaciones de derechos humanos, de asociaciones de abogados, que se pronunciaron todo en el mismo tiempo pidiéndole al presidente Biden la liberación inmediata de Alex. Y realmente ellos me ayudaron y me dieron la fuerza para seguir luchando.
Alex Saab was released with the help of a global movement where several nations spoke up in solidarity for his freedom. Amongst them are Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Parilla, Iranian Ambassador to Venezuela Hojatollah Soltani, and Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega. Nicaragua was mentioned in a previous story covered by us that was aired in August 2023, as well as coverage on Julian Assange, which aired in September 6, 2023.
Hi Julian. Imran, how are you?
Alex Saab was released through a pardon by the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Unfortunately, that pardon entails that Alex Saab cannot file a lawsuit against the United States government for his kidnapping and torture. Saab also cannot claim that there were seizures on any assets, and any films and books related to his case has become prohibited. Regardless of the nature of the release, Alex Saab has finally been let go to return to his family. As said by President Daniel Ortega in regard to the long-awaited release of Alex Saab, it was a battle for justice. And by the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry, Alex Saab's freedom is a symbol of victory of the Bolivarian diplomacy of peace and of the thousands of demonstrations of solidarity expressed from all corners of the world by social movements, intellectuals, artists, and other fighters for justice.